Thank you, Mrs. Yulee. So good evening and welcome to the Eastchester Town Zoning Board of Appeals meeting for April. This is April 13th, 2021. And what I usually do at this point in our meetings is to go over some of the basic ground rules. Firstly, tonight's meeting is virtual or remote. We're doing it via Zoom and it's not in person. So some of the ordinary and customary things that we do with a meeting, like pledge and a roll call, are dispensed with for obvious reasons. To let the public know, we are observing and being governed by the Robert's Rules of Parliamentary Order. What the public needs to know is that you'll be recognized. You can speak when you're recognized. Also, if anyone is contemplating an application, as I mentioned in every meeting, our calendar is printed usually about a year in advance. We meet once a month except for August. And the months of July and December are for resolution only. So if you're contemplating something that is time sensitive, we now will be meeting May and June. There'll be no meeting for new matters in July. And as part of the terms and conditions of applications, new applications are not decided the first night that they are heard. They are deliberated. So any new matter tonight will not be decided. The earliest would be May. Well, actually, before I go into any roll, I do have a motion to approve the minutes from the March 9th, 2021 ZBA meeting. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Caitlin, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, so we have one matter on for resolution. We have an old business matter that has a public meeting that is open, and we have two new business matters. So just to let the public know, the applicants know on the new business matters, procedurally what will happen is you'll make your presentation. For the new matters, those matters have been marked submitted, and your documents are all matters of public record. So you don't need to read them. You could. It's not going to either help or hurt your application. I would certainly ask you to give a brief presentation. And then what generally happens is the board has an opportunity to ask questions or make comments. The public has an opportunity to be heard, and then the applicant would generally have an opportunity to reply, and then the board would have a chance to follow up with questions or comments. Okay, if the public wants to participate, you're going to use your raise your hand feature if you're on Zoom, *9 if you're calling from a phone. Our Deputy Town Attorney, Robert Tedisco, will acknowledge you and invite you to speak. You will at that point unmute your microphone, and you'll state your name and address for the record, and you'll be able to reply. Okay, so item 1 on the calendar is, I make a motion for item 1 actually to approve this application 21-0365 Joyce Road. Is there a second to my motion?
Second.
Mr. Nerzia, to the vote. Mr. Cahalan?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Nerzia?
Yes.
Mr. DeMarco?
Yes.
And I vote yes. The application's been approved 5-0. Next item under old business is item number 2 is 23 Club Way. If the applicant would like to unmute and perhaps give a brief synopsis of her presentation from the last meeting.
And hold on just 1 minute. I made a mistake here, so I need to promote the right person.
That would be the first time Mrs. Yulee has ever made a mistake.
Yeah, not. And this is.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So we're all set now.
Good. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jonathan Villani, representing Annunziata Villani Design Consultants for the owners of 23 Club Way, a proposed 2-story addition to a 1-family dwelling. I'm sure you're all familiar with the project we presented at the last zoning board meeting. We're requesting a side yard setback of 8 feet as opposed to 12, and an increase in the rear yard setback. We discussed it in length, the degrees of variance, and after and the mitigations that could be taken place to help reduce the impact. And since then, we've presented drawings and submitted drawings that show several arborvitaes, I believe 8 or 9 of them. I'd like to share my screen because I'll just go through the drawings real quick.
Would you please? Thank you.
So this is the existing site plan where the side yard setback is 16.9 and 16.93 in the rear. And the proposed site plan is 15.83 rear yard setback and an 8-foot side yard setback with a planting bed and 7 giant arborvitaes planted along the property line to help to reduce the impact of the proposed addition to the neighbor. At the last meeting, there was a discussion of reducing the addition by a foot, but after several discussions, we decided this house is not a large house. It's a very small house, and every inch counts. So we decided not to reduce the addition by a foot, and presented in conjunction with the 5 principal points of impact on the neighborhood, adverse effect, characteristics. We looked through all the 5 principal points and decided that the proposed addition wasn't as impactful to the relative neighbors as we were discussed in the last meeting. Let me just bring up another drawing. So this is the proposed arborvitaes along the proposed side elevation, as well as a photo with them in the rendering, as well as several examples of properties that have less than an 8-foot setback or an 8-foot setback that are immediately across the street. They are a different zone, but they're in direct relationship to the subject property. So we did do the mitigation that was requested in the previous meeting of the giant arborvitaes along the property line, but did not reduce the addition by a foot.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vellani, for your presentation. I'm sorry?
Not a problem.
Okay, so at this time, I would generally open it up to the board for questions or comments, but I just wanted to get a clarification because you're using an adjective with the arborvitae, and it's my understanding that these are mature arborvitae, correct? They're 6 to 8
Correct.
feet.
The name is actually giant arborvitae, but on my plans they're planned to be purchased at 8'6", and they would actually grow larger than that.
Great. No, what I'm suggesting is that sometimes we have the problem with people who are getting immature arborvitae,
Yes.
and it takes years and years, and this is a substantial expense. My understanding is when you're dealing with arborvitae of that size.
No, and that's why we took that into account, and I presented on my drawings. It does indicate that they will be purchased somewhere around 8'6" at its planting, and they would grow from there.
Great. Okay, thank you for that clarification. So let me open it up to the board for questions or comments. Mr. Cahalan?
Yeah, I mean, I am, the applicant, did point out that they're trying to make the point that there are other 8-foot setbacks, but really he's talking about 2 different zones. We're talking the R7-5 versus the 5. And for us, we're setting, if this application is approved, we're setting in my mind, a very slippery slope for people. We're setting a precedent that why have zones? We have zones for a reason, and we have setbacks for a reason. So to try and slip in an 8-foot setback and say that it's the same for other in the area when the area other zones are different, that's not really a good argument in my mind. And I understand it's a small house, and I understand they want to optimize it to everything, but I think a 33% variance is a substantial variance. I'm not, I understand they have the right to do this, and I just can't get behind it. I don't see, asking for a foot doesn't all change that much in my mind. And that's where I'm at with it. I'm just not there on this with this.
Okay.
Would it be okay if I respond?
Actually, I would ask that you hold
Okay.
for a moment. Is there anything further, Mr. Cahalan?
No.
Okay. Mr. Miller, any questions or comments?
None at this time.
Mr. Nerzia, questions or comments?
My comment is just echoing Mr. Cahalan's comments regarding the precedent. So that was it.
Mr. DeMarco?
Nothing.
I don't have anything in this time. Mr. Villani, did you want to reply?
No, I just wanted to state that if it was just relative to the numbers and the degree of variance, then I don't see much of a point of responding to the 5 principal points of the degrees of affectation to the relative neighbors, because they're immediately across the street. So that's the only reason why we're responding to 5 principal points that affect the character of the neighborhood, the predominant relative consistency of how they're laid out in that neighborhood and in site plan and in aerial plan. It is consistent. We can't deny that it is. I just want to say that it's not. I understand the degree of variance, but you also have to address the principal points if they're part of your application.
Oh, absolutely.
Alan, can I make one comment?
You can, Mrs. Yulee, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I just, with regard to the concern about the precedent, the only thing that I would say is I would think that I'd be more concerned about that potentially, again, if this lot was located in the middle of an R75 district. And I think the board is supposed to look at the individual lot and the individual characteristics of that particular lot, the unique characteristics of that lot in the context of the character of the neighborhood, like Mr. Villani said. And so I do understand the argument of saying that this particular lot is adjacent to one other lot in the R75 district. It borders on a golf course on one side, and the 4 houses across the street all have approximately 8-foot side yard setback. So I do think that it's not necessarily precedent setting to grant a variance if in your findings you find unique characteristics about this particular lot. That's, otherwise every decision you would make would set a precedent for the next lot, I can see how the applicant can make a very strong argument that this particular lot has some unique characteristics, including the fact that it's an undersized lot, which limits the building envelope overall under any circumstances, and including the fact, again, that it's adjacent to only one other R75. And again, Mr. Nerzia and Mr. Cahalan could disagree with that, and the neighbors at 17 Clubway could disagree with that. But I just, with regard to the concern for precedent, I think you're not setting a precedent if your findings discuss why, under these circumstances, the variance is appropriate.
And Margaret,
Well, hold on a minute before we go back and forth. Thank you, Mrs. Yulee. Mr. Cahalan, do you have anything further?
Yeah, I mean, I understand what Mrs. Yulee is saying. I don't like to disagree with her, but on this case, I feel very strongly. And the problem that we're having all over town is everybody thinks, well, it's not a precedent and it's not this and it's not that, but we keep seeing more and more of these applications. So at some point, when are we responsible? We're asking, we suggested that we take a foot to make it a 25% variance. I think, we've had other applications and other applicants have come in and done much more. And that's their choice. I mean, it's their property. They can do what they want with it. But they're here now, and unfortunately, I can't agree with Mrs. Yulee on this. I think that the precedent is important. And I think just because it's an odd side lot doesn't matter. They're getting a 36% variance in the back because they are at the end of the street on a golf course. And it really doesn't, the back lot doesn't have much to do with the neighbor. Thank God, just because of the way it lines up. But again, a substantial variance. 36% is a substantial variance. So I'm sorry, but I can't agree with Mrs. Yulee tonight on this.
Well,
thank you for your. Oh, hold on,
Alan. I just want to say,
Mrs. Yulee, hold on 1 second.
Okay.
1 second. This is Mr. Cahalan. You're a voting member of the board, and your opinion is on the record. You don't have to either defend your opinion, and Mrs. Yulee was just making commentary about the application. And again, I'm going to reserve my comments until after the public, other than that and again, reasonable minds differ. That's what makes up the board. I see that this is absolutely well within the character of the neighborhood. I don't see it outside the character at all. As a matter of fact, I don't think anyone would even know a variance was granted once it's constructed. So I'll have to see it the way you see it, and I'll recognize you in a moment. I'm making a comment, and my comment is that you don't need to defend your your rationale and your reasoning, but it's also not, no one's going to win this argument. It's just there are 5 voting members here. So I don't want it to become and devolve into a cage match between board members. You stated your opinion. Your opinion is very reasonable. There's a rationale behind it, and that is it. Now, Mrs. Yulee, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I'm going to make 2 quick comments, and
Please.
you sort of said what I was planning to say. Is my intent was not to agree or disagree with any board members. My intent was to say I think that board members, if they felt comfortable, could feel comfortable making a finding where they did not feel like they were setting a precedent. So it was not intended to be a disagreement with any board member. It was just pointing that out. And then I think when you do finish polling the board members, I can see that the applicant herself is very anxious to participate as well. So I just wanted to let her participate when you're ready.
I think that would be fantastic. Because the public is still open on this, I'd like to see if anyone from the public wants to be heard, because I think it will give the applicant an ability to reply to everything on a holistic basis rather than have to go back and forth. So unless the applicant wants to speak now.
Janine,
I can wait.
speak?
Okay. So having heard that, the public hearing has been left open on this. So Mr. Tedisco, can you check to see if anyone from the public would like to be heard on this application?
I am looking now, Mr. Chairman. Is there any member of the public that wishes to address the board on this application? Please use your raise your hand feature and I will invite you to unmute yourself. There is a hand raised from Mr. Schultz. Mr. Schultz, if you want to unmute yourself, please address the board and identify yourself by your name and address for the record.
Good evening, everyone. Dan Schultz, 17 Clubway, Eastchester, New York. First, I want to thank everyone for our letters that you've read and taken into account our considerations. Just a few comments that I wanted to make in terms of the uniqueness. The one thing that I just want to bring up, and again, talking about, communicating and talking about ideas. If you go back to the letter that we put in on March 8th and setting a precedent, if you go back and look at 1 Clubway, 5 Clubway, 9 Clubway, and 17 Clubway, okay, all of those properties that are in this district, okay, all have what I believe you would call, I'm not an expert, but I've learned a lot through this process. They all have what I would call conforming setbacks. And that was addressed in our original letter back on March 8th. So about precedent, I think one of the things that I would bring up as a topic for discussion or for consideration would be, wouldn't that open up, like having this happen at 23, wouldn't this obviously then open that up for 1, 5, 9, and 17, even myself, okay, to ask for the same type of variance that's being discussed here for 23? And then if it happens for those houses on Clubway, does it not creep up the block to Park Drive either way? So that's just one of the things I wanted to bring up. And just to keep it brief, because I know you guys have a lot on your plate. The other thing that, that I just want to make sure you guys understand is that, we stand behind our original letter that we sent out on March 8th, and we stand behind the letter that we sent out and gave to Margaret on Monday, which was dated April 12th. Again, the whole idea of not discussing, feasible alternatives, the whole idea of the variance being substantial, and the creation, obviously, of like this zoning issue being self-created. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. I know that you guys are in the midst of making a decision. I wanted to thank you for your time and for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz.
You're welcome.
Mr. Tedisco, is there anyone else who'd like to be heard on this application?
One moment. Is there anyone else from the public that would like to address the board on this application? Mr. Chairman, I do not see any hands raised at this time. Therefore, it does not appear that there are any members of the public that wish to address the board.
Okay, having heard that, I make a motion to close the public hearing on this matter. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Miller, all in favor? Aye.
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 Okay. So, if the applicant would like to reply to some commentary, either from the board, or from the public, please feel free to do so.
Yes, thank you. I just really want to say thank you to everyone on the board and Margaret for your time. I just want to put some real perspective into this. I'm not an architect, and I know there's a lot of zoning laws, but our house is only 1,600 square feet. When we bought this house almost 14 years ago, we had no kids. We now have 3 girls and 4 females in the house and 1 shower. So we are just trying to make our home more livable for us. We have looked into the options of moving, and a 4-bedroom house in Eastchester, as I said in the last meeting, is $1 million. Now it's $1.2 million. It just keeps going up, and it's not an option for us to move. All we're trying to do is improve our living space. I now work from home full time. We have 1 shower in our entire house. If we lose the foot, it really hurts us in trying to make one of the powder room downstairs a full bathroom. I'm just trying to explain, we're not trying to disadvantage anyone. I'm not blocking anybody's view. We're making a 1,600 square foot house. We're trying to make it maybe 2,000 square feet. I don't think we're asking for a lot. It's not going to disrupt anybody. We'll put the arborvitaes up. We really just want to do the best that we can with the property that we have. All the houses across the street from us, directly across inside of us, are an 8-foot setback. I really it's just for the needs of our family, and this is the most affordable way that we can expand right now instead of moving. So in order for us to change all the plans right now to reduce 1 foot is just going to give us more cost architecturally. And we spoke to a few contractors. It's really not going to make a difference on the price. So we'd be paying the same price and not being able to expand a bathroom. It just might not be worth it for us in the end, even though we would get another small bedroom. We just want to make our girls be able to have their own space, and for us, to be able to live a little bit more comfortably in maybe a 2,000 square foot house. And I really appreciate everybody's time on this. It's been a lot on my family, back and forth with the architects and the meetings. And I really appreciate the time that you're putting into this, and hope that you will let us do this. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation and for supplementing it as well. Okay, so let me go back to the board one more time for any comments or questions. I'll start on the other side. Mr. DeMarco?
Nothing.
Mr. Nerzia?
At this time, no.
Mr. Miller?
No.
Mr. Cahalan?
No.
Okay, and my only comment is that it's a 403 foot square foot addition. To me, I think you've met the test requirements, and the one thing that I want to just comment on, which I tend to have to comment on frequently, is that I hear a lot of commentary on applications in opposition that if only they would abide by we're okay with the rules as long as they abide by the rules. And I want everyone to understand that every homeowner has the right to apply for a variance. It's your legal right to do so. So these zoning codes evolve over years and decades. So we are obligated to judge the application, not the applicant. And based on the application, I think that you've met the 5-part test. And my comment about this being a de minimis addition with also a substantial expense in mitigating, to me, makes it seem like it's very much in line with the neighborhood. So having said that, I'm making a motion to adjourn this for resolution at the next meeting. Is there a second to my motion?
Second.
Mr. Miller, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Okay. Next item is new business. This is 62 Vernon Drive. The applicant can come forward and state your name and address and make your presentation, please.
All right, I have to promote people. This is, there we go.
Okay, can you see me?
Yes.
You can hear me, okay. Good evening. Okay, my name is Jeff Barino. I'm representing Tony and Susan Mastroli at 62 Vernon Drive. The property is located in R7.5 zone. We're proposing to replace an existing deck. It's an existing non-conforming deck in the same location with a minor expansion. If I can share my screen, I would like to do so. I have an overlay survey.
Please.
Okay. If you can see. Are you able to see?
Not yet, no.
Not yet.
Let's see. One second.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, I'll zoom in for you. So the deck is in the rear yard, right up against the golf course. What we're proposing to do, and I'll zoom in a little bit more, the existing deck is this outline here, and with this little bump out on the side. And so we're going to take out the existing stair. We're going to take out the side portion that bumps in the right hand side. A portion of that actually is within the encroaching into the setback. So what we're planning to do is that the hatched areas here, where this little bay bump out is, we want to fill that in. So what we're asking for is a 10-foot setback in the rear yard. Let me go to the drawing. So we're going to take the existing stair that encroaches actually even further into the setback and put it on the left-hand side here, so it comes down into the patio. And we're not going any closer to the rear yard than the existing deck is. And we're going to show you some pictures. Stop sharing here. Give me one sec. Just share my screen. So we have there's some mature evergreens along the right-hand side of the home and the rear, and a fence to the left-hand side. Let me just share again here. So, can you see this picture? You have a good view?
Yes.
Okay, so let me just flip through a couple of the photos. So there's just some existing screening here, so we wouldn't need to plant any. And this shows the existing deck. So where this bay bump out is where we want to square off the deck. So we said we have owner support on 64 Vernon Drive and to the left, and then to the right, we have two notarized letters and in favor of the deck. We feel that the deck is similar to the existing. It won't have any adverse effects on the neighborhood. In fact, the deck has been there for many years. And we're going to change the aesthetics. So we have actually made a 3D drawing, which I'd like to show you. So can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, so this is what the new deck will look like, the squared off version. This is with the relocated step and the new patio. In one of the letters it says that we need a variance for the patio, but we we don't. We just need it for the deck too. So we feel that the deck has been in existence for many years, and the owners would like to. The reason we're squaring off the deck is so it's more functional. They can fit a table on there, and we don't feel really it's encroaching on the back. In fact, we're taking the stair and relocating it. So that's basically it.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation. At this time now, I generally will open it up to the board for comments or questions. Mr. Cahalan?
None.
Mr. Miller?
None.
Mr. Nerzia?
No questions.
Mr. DeMarco?
Nothing.
I have nothing at this time. I'll make a motion now to open this matter to the public for a public hearing. Is there a second to my motion?
Second.
Mr. Cahalan, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, Mr. Tedisco, can you check to see if there's anyone from the public having any interest?
Mr. Chairman, if there are any members of the public that wish to address the board on this application, please raise your hand and I will invite you to unmute yourself. Mr. Chairman, and after reviewing the gallery of attendees, it does not appear that any members of the public wish to address the board on this application.
Okay, I make a motion to close the public hearing on this matter. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Cahalan, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, back to the board. We'll go in the other direction. Mr. DeMarco, anything?
Nothing.
Mr. Nerzia?
No, sir.
Mr. Miller?
No.
Mr. Cahalan?
No.
Now, my only comment is that the request is, in my estimation, de minimis, and you've certainly answered the five-part test to my satisfaction. I make a motion to adjourn this for resolution at the next meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Cahalan, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you for your application.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. So, final item on the calendar is 189-191 Brook Street, Kids Corner. The applicant could come forward, state your name and address for the record, and if you could synopsize your presentation, please.
I'm sorry, I didn't know what happened. I just disappeared.
All right, so I think that's everyone on your team now, Ivy.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you all for having us here this evening, and I appreciate your time. My name is Dr. Ivy Rentz. I am the owner of Kids Corner. We are currently operating at 777 White Plains Road. Additionally, I have my attorney, Greg Berrien, on the call, the architect, Teresa Baer, and the traffic consultant, Carlito Holt, from Preventive Design Engineering, and site plan engineer, Louise Griggs, from G&D Engineering, on the call. I'm going to just give a brief overview of the project, and then I'll pass off to my team. So at the proposed site, 189-191 Brook Street, there currently is, can I share my screen?
Please do. Thank you.
Okay, hold on. Okay. 1 second, I'm sorry. There we go. I lost everybody, hold on. Okay. Why can't I, oh, I see it. Sorry, it took me a minute to.
It's okay, take your time.
I'm kind of frozen, I don't know what's going on. Let me see if I can move the screen. It's not letting me move the screen. All right, let me try to make it a little bit bigger. Can you guys see what I'm looking at?
Yes.
Okay. So the proposed site, this is the top picture is the current structure on the site. And then the second picture is the vacant lot adjacent, which is 91. So that's 189 and 191. So at the current site, there is a 2.5-story building that is partially located on the town's property, coming close to the sidewalk. And the ground level is retail and the top 2 floors are residential. The current property has been vacant for quite a few years. What we are proposing at this site, and I'm gonna kind of minimize it a little bit so you can see a little bit, is a 2-story building, approximately 3,333.97 square feet, with a parking lot to the front of the building and a rear yard, approximately 544 square feet, for the purpose of a child daycare center. We're actually going to close and then move to the new location. Our current hours of operation are from 7 to 6:30 p.m. We are proposing at this site 56 children. We suspect that once we get to the state level, that number will reduce somewhere between. We know we're going to lose at least two children in this second floor rear room right here in terms of the exit, leaving from this classroom to that classroom. So we're going to actually lose two more children once the state measures everything out. So we're looking somewhere between 50 to 54 once the state comes in and does their final measurements. So I'm coming before the zoning board seeking first a special permit to operate a child daycare center at this location. Secondly, because we are seeking variances, and amongst the variances, there are 5. One is to permit a lot of 5,000 square feet where we have a minimum of 15,000 square feet required. And then a rear setback of 13 feet, whereas we're required a minimum of 30. The first left side yard setback of 5 feet, where we required 10, and then a second right side setback of 5 feet, where we required 10 again. And then lastly, the parking. We're required to have a minimum of 20 parking spaces based on the Eastchester code. Currently, we're proposing 3 on the site. Okay. Right now, if you look at the site, I'm going to bring us back to the picture. What we're proposing would provide, especially on that left side, if I'm looking directly at the site, it's within 3 feet of the adjacent structure. There's no way to get in between to landscape. We're proposing to move the building back so that we are also not interfering with the light and the air of the adjacent building, clean up that vacant lot that's just been sitting there as an eyesore, and also provide a building that is aesthetically pleasing, I think, to the community. It looks more like the residential properties that move alongside Brookside as you go west. Additionally, Eastchester requires with the parking that we have 13, one for each staff person, and 500 square feet of gross floor area, which would require us to have approximately 7 spaces. So the total would be 20. Right now, more than half the staff either takes the bus or they are dropped off to the facility. And so now we would only require 6 parking spaces. We are proposing that 2 of them be on the site in the parking lot in the front. And we've obtained 2 permit parking spaces adjacent to the CVS parking lot. We are proposing that 2 additional permitted parking spaces be allowed in the parking lot directly across the street from CVS. In addition to that parking requirement, Eastchester also requires that we have a designated drop-off and pickup area. So let me kind of get down to where that picture is. Hold on, sorry, it's moving a little slow. What is going on? Okay, let me get to the drop-off. Okay, so I'm gonna blow it up a little bit. Okay, so what we're proposing right now, our parents arrive between 7 and 10 a.m. in the morning. We currently have 54 children. We are licensed to have 74 children. At the current facility, we actually would be reducing the number of children once we move to the proposed site. What we're proposing is on this east side of the proposed project that we would have the limited parking time or even the space for this space number 3, space number 2, and space number 1 would be the driveway for the proposed site, where we would cone it off in the mornings and in the afternoons to allow parents traveling east to just pull into the space and move into get out their car, park, and go into the facility. We've kind of changed our drop-offs procedures because of COVID, so parents are not allowed into the building unless they make an appointment. That's just for safety reasons and to control contact with people outside of the facility. So typically we have 2 to 3 parents drop off every 10 minutes. If you look at, and Carlito will get more into this as we get further in, but I'm just going to give you an idea. Typically, we have about 8 to 9 families that have more than one child at the center. So the yellow highlighted areas are drop-offs that contain 2 children from one family. So if you look at like 7 o'clock in the morning from 7 to 10, we have 3 children being dropped off, but only 2 families doing the drop-off. So that we have enough parking with those 3 spaces. Same thing if we go down to 720, where you see 4 highlighted spaces. That means there are 2 families dropping off 4 children. So we would still have an available parking space at that time. And as you can see, where there's dashes is where we don't have parents dropping off typically in that spot. So typically we have 2 to 3 parents every 10 minutes, and it's the same with the pickup schedule. It's very similar to the morning. And if parents are dropping off at different times, it's because like a doctor's appointment or whatever, and they tell us in advance either via phone or they tell us through our app. We have an app that parents can put in vacation time or any notes for us that pop up first thing in the morning when we open, so each classroom teacher sees what's going on with the kids before their arrival. We also don't get a lot of parents traveling from that west end. I'm trying to pull it up. So this would be coming from the west, coming up Brook Street. We don't get a lot of parents from that location. Currently, we have 2 parents traveling from that direction, and we're proposing that those parents would make that left on Dunwoody and come up Summerfield Street and then come around on to White Plains Road and then make that right turn right on into the proposed parking in front of the site. And that's historically been our case. Most of our parents come from the Eastchester side of Eastchester and the east of Scarsdale, Tuckahoe, White Plains, north end of New Rochelle. And excuse me, and that's consistent throughout the 10 years we've been there. And I think it's primarily because when you go towards the west, there are other daycare centers, 2 other daycare centers that would kind of cover some of that population. So we don't really get a lot of those kids from that direction. The other thing is we are one of 2 programs in the area that take infants. So most of our parents come in at younger ages and they stay till the children are older. So we on average, we have a parent from 3 to 5 years, depending on how young the child is when they come in. I will pass this over to Teresa, who's our architect. Let me move the slides back up. She can continue. Hold on, just move it to the beginning, Teresa. I'm not sure where you're gonna start. Okay, let me see. It's a big file, I'm sorry. It takes a long time.
Take your time.
Okay, Let me get past all these pictures. Hold on. Okay. All right, Teresa, if you want to start with our project description and aspect area variance, here we go. Teresa, are you there? Hold on, I can't see everybody because I'm sharing. Teresa?
She's on mute.
You're on mute, Teresa. I'm sorry.
I know, I'm trying to unmute myself. Now I can't see the picture, so let me just get back to that. Okay, now I'm back to screen sharing and I can talk. Yeah, so the as Ivy said, the proposed project, it's in a retail business zone, and any retail business is not going to have enough parking here, and because we wanted to make the parking not use up all of the site, we've pushed the building back a bit, and that's why we have the rear setback is smaller than it might be. The side setback on the left currently is less than 1 foot, and we are going to have just a little tad over 5 feet. And on the right-hand side, it's currently, there's an empty lot, so it's a lot. But by pushing the building back, we will be adjacent to some utility buildings and parking and things for the apartment building. So the effect on the parking on the apartment building should be minimal. In terms of the site size and the 15,000 square feet, we don't know of any daycares that are on property so big in Westchester. There may be some in the northern part of the county, but in general, daycares are in smaller buildings that people, we found, and I've found that about 50 to 60 people, kids is the ideal size for a daycare. That's what, you can really keep track of. If Ivy, can you get me to the plan? And the site is a little weird because although it is zoned retail business, everything towards White Plains Road is retail, but everything to the left until you get down to the corner seems to be residential on our side of the street. But that doesn't mean, so we've tried to make the daycare look residential, but it is definitely a commercial building. It's zoned commercial. So you can see here in the elevation, we have a covered porch. So when the families bring their kids, they can stand at that porch waiting, if necessary, to check in their kids at this front door, which is under that kids' corner sign. The plan of the daycare has all of the babies and toddlers on the ground floor because they need to have exits directly at grade level. And then upstairs we have the pre-K kids and the office because they can use the fire stair. And as long as we have less than 50 people upstairs, we don't get into requirements for the ADA. There's a special exception for, among other things, institutional buildings, I-4, which is what a daycare is. So you come into a foyer. We have a simple hall, two rooms in the back, one in the front, 2 handicapped toilets on the ground floor. When we go upstairs, we have the pre-K rooms and the office for the adults, where there will also probably be a lounge and kitchenette kind of equipment, janitor's closet, and the children's bathroom. The pre-K kids are the only ones who actually use the bathroom. The babies and toddlers obviously are either getting changed or using potties. So we don't need a bathroom for them downstairs. That's really pretty much it for the plan. It's very simple. We made it as small as we could and still, have enough kids to make it worthwhile to build. It's a kind of a funny situation where the lots are really too small for what they should hold. But that's about it. In terms of that, I'm just looking to see whether there was anything else about the special permits. As Ivy said, there's a playground in the back. The rule about the playground is it has to be as big as your biggest classroom. So that's what we've provided. That kind of determined how big we could make the parking lot. But also, we were trying to provide a balance between providing as much parking as possible, but also providing as many setbacks as possible. And it's not easy. I think Ivy's addressed the other things. All the details of the state inspections and things. They will walk through and what, as Ivy sort of intimated, they have a tendency to look at the furniture and how kids actually walk and say, you say we've got 11 kids here, but we're going to take, we're only going to let you have 9. So she's anticipating that, but we never know for sure what the actual number is going to be until the fire marshal from the state comes through. It seems to be, it isn't really done by, the rules are not clear in terms of how he measures. So
he really takes into safety considerations in terms of exiting the building. So when there's question, he always errs on the side of caution, which is less kids.
he should.
Anything further with your application?
I'm going to ask Carlito to speak.
Good evening, everyone. Carlito Holt with Provident Design Engineering. We're the traffic consultant on the project. I just want to touch upon some of the things that Ivy already touched upon and just go over it in a little bit more detail. With respect to the parking, I think one of the important items to note is although that this is a newly proposed use at this location, it's essentially a use that exists across the street. So they're taking their operation, which is currently next to the DeChico's, that shopping center, and moving it to this location. So this is a known operation, and all the data that we're relying upon is stuff that exists, and Ivy can specifically detail it to ensure that what we're calculating and what we're estimating for pickup and drop off is accurate. And she mentioned the 10-minute drop off periods that she currently has set up with her parents. What she does is she has her parents sign a contract when they enroll their students. As part of that contract, they would be designated a 10-minute period for pickup and drop off, so that we know that there'll never be more than 3 vehicles picking up or dropping off during a 10-minute time period. With respect to the staff parking, 2 of the staff, as Ivy mentioned, would park on site. Those would be the first 2 arriving staff. So they would park on site, and then you can cone off the driveway to allow for that 3rd space for pickup and drop off. The site, the constraints on the site aren't such that you can allow the pickup and drop off to occur on the site, because you can't have the parents turning in and out where that location is. So I think the way we have it set up along the curb and the parents arriving on the daycare side of Brook Street limits any potential conflict with vehicles and parents dropping off their children. And I know there was some concern about the two spaces that would be converted to temporary pickup and drop off during those time periods during the day, having an impact upon residents or other commercial properties in the area. Most of the commercial properties are already served by off-street parking, and they really peak more in the evening or weekend hours when the daycare center isn't in operation. So I think, this plan as presented with the pickup and drop off is one that should work safely and efficiently, and would allow for an operation for a daycare center to exist at this location.
Okay, thank you. Was anything further from the applicant?
No.
Okay, so thank you for your presentation. As I always mention on every new application, the documents have all been marked submitted, and they are part of the public record and have been reviewed by the board. At this time, I'm going to open it to the board for comments or questions. Mr. Cahalan?
None.
Mr. Miller? Mr. Miller?
No, none.
Okay. Mr. Nerzia?
Yes, I do. The first question is I think you said the proposal is that you'd have 56 kids. Are you maxed out at 56, or is that that's your internal policy for the number of children you'd be?
That would be the max based on the square footage of the facility. We suspect that it is going to be less because, as Teresa mentioned, once the fire marshal from the state comes in, he takes in consideration the exit paths, where the furniture is placed, and then, he kind of cuts back from there. In the current facility we proposed 80, and he cut us back 8 and knocked us down to about 72.
Yeah, okay, got it. The other question I had is, you had a grid basically saying, at certain times, certain families will be dropping off their kids. So I have a question on that. Mm-hmm. If, let's say, a family moves out of town, they don't need your services anymore. If I called up and I said, listen, I need daycare services, am I only, is the only available slot the one that is no longer using you anymore?
No.
How does that work?
If you look, so this is what is currently happening, right? Which is very consistent to what we're proposing. It's not much different. If you look at the actual grid, if I can go back to that, hold on. If you go back to the grid, let me get to where the grid is. I'm sorry. If you look at the grid, there are dashes there where you see that there's nobody in those slots.
Yeah.
So that means that all of these are available for drop off, and it's a lot. It's, it's starting from 7:50 in the morning all the way till 10 o'clock.
Okay.
Where we would have extra slots.
Yeah. But if let's say I call up, or any potential client, and they say the only available time I could drop off my kid or kids is at 8:30. Looking at your grid,
it's still the same thing as if a parent calls and says, "Oh, I need Monday, Wednesday, Friday," and we don't have Monday, Wednesday, Friday available because we have parents that bring kids 2 days a week, 3 days a week, 4 days a week. It's what we have available. I mean, it is what it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So conceivably, if you're overbooked at certain time slots and there's no availability, you can't take on that client.
Yeah, even we can't overbook because we can't have kids out of ratio. So there's another component to this where our staff has to be there at a certain time. We have to have a certain number. We can never be out of ratio. So I can't overbook a parent and say, oh, well, if you need Wednesday, I can just add an extra kid. It doesn't work like that. We're going to get shut down.
Okay. And then the follow-up question is obviously you have this tight schedule and these 10-minute blocks, but what happens if, you're backlogged or parents are showing up early or what? I mean,
so what I'm showing you now.
How do you enforce that to make sure that they're going to show up on time and leave on time?
What you're looking at right now is what's actually happening right now. So we typically don't have this convergence of parents. Our parents are very considerate, especially during COVID. They have been very compliant with calling, giving us a 5-minute lead time to let us know to have the kid ready. We bring the kid to the door. We take the temperature when they exit and when they come in. So we know that we gave back a healthy child. So it's very streamlined. It's a little bit different than we used to just let parents come in the building, pick their own kid up, and that could take a lot more time. This is very streamlined. The kid is at the door. Someone is stationed at the door at all times during these pickup and drop off times.
Okay. But my concern is if you have somebody, for whatever reason, they're either 15, 20 minutes early, 15, 20 minutes late. So you've got multiple families dropping off within a certain time frame. What do you do for that person who's consistently late or early? And I'm sure you're eventually going to get somebody who's always late or early. What do you do?
We do have a late policy that we charge $100. I have in 10 years never collected a late fee. I'm telling you, I don't. Parents are very, very, I mean, they're very consistent. A lot of my parents, and I made it $100 because I don't want a late fee. I want parents to either pick up their child or one of those 3 people that are on that emergency list to come and get the child at the scheduled time. So they have to provide us with 3 people for emergency. Now, have we had emergencies? Yes. There was a huge emergency a couple of years ago in October where we were all stranded in the daycare. Parents couldn't get to us and we couldn't leave because of the way everything worked out, a storm, and we were just stuck there. I mean, we all stayed there until parents could, and I was there till 11 o'clock at night until the last kid left. I mean, that's kind of what happened, but that's an extreme case. Typically, our parents are very respectful because our employees have to catch that last bus. And they need to get to the bus stop by 6:40. Otherwise, it's going to be a whole nother hour. So we really try to work with our parents. If there's an issue, we try to address it ahead of time.
Okay. Got it.
Anything further, Mr. Nerzia?
Yeah, no, that was it.
Thank you. Mr. DeMarco?
Nothing, thank you.
Okay. Well, before I open this to the public for public hearing, I think it seems like the bulk of Mr. Nerzia's comments and the bulk of your presentation seems to be directed at what my major concern is, and that is that you're taking the parking obligations and putting them onto Brook Street, and we're putting that right at the T stop with Ray Place. And although your presentation is very thorough and very well thought out, it seems that a lot of these assumptions are just that. They're based on assumptions that require compliance and other things that have to happen, like getting permits and for parents to be fully compliant with directionals and time, where if 1 or 2 are not, you're dealing with U-turns and other things that I have a concern with. Naturally, we're in the infancy stage of your application, but I just want to make that point clear that the application really is taking the parking and traffic obligations and essentially throwing them out onto Brook Street, which is my concern. And I don't see the comparison between the parking lot next to Chico's and Brook Street. That would be, I can't find anything in those two that are comparable, actually, other than pavement. Honestly, I don't see how that comparison is ever made. Having said that, I'm going to open the application to the public for a public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Cahalan, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Mr. Tedisco, if anyone from the public would like to be heard?
Yes, there's a Miss Patricia Gabrielle. Going to invite you to unmute yourself. Just please identify yourself for the board by name and address.
Hi, Pat Gabriel at Ray Place. Actually, Mr. Pillow kind of made the comment before I'm going to want to be clear. You're saying that 2 of the parking spots on Brook Street will now be dedicated to your school in the morning and 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the afternoon. Is that correct?
If you'd like to answer that, you may.
Okay, I wasn't sure if I could answer.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, but I like to avoid the crosstalk. I appreciate that.
Oh, no.
I'd like that clarification as well, if you don't mind.
Okay, so the 2 parking spaces directly in front of the proposed site, we're asking for those limited a 15-minute minimum parking between those times to allow parents to safely drop off, and they are directly in front of our site.
Because I think that's quite 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the afternoon. It's taking parking from area businesses and area residents. There's not that much parking for people who come to visit, other people who live here. So I think that's unfair that one business has dedicated parking for 6 hours of the day. So that was and you kind of, Alan kind of talked to that a little bit, saying you can't compare where you are now. And the other thing is, I lost my train of thought.
Don't be nervous. Speak freely.
No, you can't say, what happens if a parent hits traffic? So what happens if a parent is late, even though they're very dedicated and they try to get there on time, but for something out of their control, what happens if they're late? Then how does your whole schedule gets thrown off? And there's not a lot of areas where people could wait. I mean, I mentioned this in the last meeting, I guess it was the planning board meeting, where I've often seen cars double parked or in front of the Kids Corner building on where you're currently located. So where you're located now, it's easy because it's in a parking lot, but where you're going to be then is going to be a lot harder. And like you said, it's right by the bottom of the Ray Place Hill. So it's kind of, that's all I had to say. I think the parking is an issue.
Can I speak to that?
Thank you. Actually, I'll give you an opportunity after the public's been heard.
Okay, no problem.
Mrs. Gabriel, anything further?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your time. By the way, we have the Eastchester traffic expert who will have an opportunity after I want the public to be heard. We'll have an opportunity to speak on this. Mr. Tedisco, anyone else from the public?
Yes, there are two other hands that I'm seeing at this time. Ms. Hannah, I'm going to invite you to unmute yourself. Just please fully identify yourself by name and address to the board.
Hi there. This is actually Issa Hanna. I am a resident of Eastchester. I live at 4 N Place in Scarsdale. Sorry, I have my kids in the background here. Sorry for the. Hi, sweetie. Sorry about that. Yeah, so I have two children. They both go to Kids Corner. My oldest is 3.5. My youngest is 1.5. It's a wonderful daycare. They love it. My oldest has been going there for over 3 years now. And, you know, I got to say, I mean, they've done a great job through the pandemic. It's been very safe, and it's a real asset to the community. And I think we're really lucky to have them, especially with a number of daycares closing in the recent past. With respect to the parking issue, I know that seems to be the biggest issue. I will say that, you know, I often pick up and drop off my kids at the current location where there, you know, are upwards. I think it's been mentioned, the current location has over 70 children. And I've never run into an issue where there's crowding at the door or anything like that. I'm often the only person picking up or dropping off at a given moment. And when I'm leaving or coming, I don't really see anybody else coming or going. And I pick up and drop off at pretty typical times. I'm there between usually 8:30 and 9 in the morning to drop off, and then pick up. It's usually between 3:30 and 4. So I don't think those are unusual times or anything like that. And again, I'm rarely, you know, anything more than the only person there picking up or dropping off. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you for your input, Mr. Hanna.
You're welcome.
Mr. Tedisco?
Yeah. There is another Mr. D'Aliosio. I'm going to invite you to unmute yourself and address the board. Please identify yourself fully by name and address.
Yes, good evening. Thank you, board members. My name is Anthony D'Aloisio. I live at 53 Oakland Avenue. I've been a resident of Eastchester all my life, the last 35 years. My kids have been part of Kids Corner. My oldest daughter from started in April of 2016 and finished August of 2020. She's now a kindergartner at the Waverly School District. My son started Kids Corner in January of 2019 and is currently still enrolled in Kids Corner. So at a given point, I had 2 kids at Kids Corner. I typically was responsible for dropping off both kids and picking them up at, around typical morning hours, usually between 7 and 8 in the morning, and then picking up between 5 and 5:30 in the evening. Most of the time, I was the only parent, maybe another family at most, but there was never been an issue with pickup. I know there is concern about the current location, the proposed location, and the parking, but Ivy and her team have been very organized. I've been, with Kids Corner for years now, and I wouldn't, I would never consider, leaving Kids Corner for how organized they are. The majority of the drop-offs and pickups do occur during off hours where, some of those retail establishments on Brook Street may not even be open yet. A lot of them are, frequented by consumers later in the day or on the weekends, which are off hours for the daycare. So that's all I have, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Dall'Oisio. I appreciate your time. Mr. Disco, anybody else?
Just one moment. At this time, Mr. Chairman, I do not see any raised hands indicating anyone that wishes to address the board. I spoke too quickly. There are 2 hands now. Mr. Fiavaranti, I'm going to invite you to unmute yourself. Please identify yourself by name and address for the board.
Yes. Hi, good evening. Hi, Margaret, members of the board. Thank you for your time this evening. To William Fioravanti or Bill Fioravanti, 24 Ray Place. 2 things. One issue in particular, in regards to that last caller, the location of this Kids Corner was in a previous location where traffic was very minimal there because it was in a parking lot. They were dropping kids on and off. It was more controlled. You didn't have a lot of vehicles speeding through a parking lot. People drive with a lot of caution. But I've lived in this area for 30 years, and I got to tell you something. When you come down Ray Place, there are many cars speeding up from Harney Road, up Brook Street, up that hill, racing to get to the light. It's like a drag race over here. So you're going to put a facility with a lot of kids with minimal parking, and you have a lot of cars that speed up and down this road. Now, who's going to better tell you about this? I am, because I live here. If you really want to know the demographics of this area, how the way the cars and sometimes even trucks speed up this road. So, it is a little dynamic, a difference of where this location of this facility will be as it was previously. So just to put that into conscious, if kids are going to be dropped off across the street on Brook Street and have to cross the street, sometimes there's cars racing when they come through the light from 22. They're going to the Bronx River Parkway, because Brook Street and Harney Road is the main thoroughfare that goes to the Bronx River Parkway and Route 22. So if they're coming up the other way from going west to east, going to Route 22, there are issues where cars are speeding to get to the light, sometimes trying to beat the light. So, when you have little kids trying to cross the street and there's a lot of activity, it can be a little dangerous for them. So, I just think this location, this is a great idea. I just think this location here, too close to the light at 22, and being that sometimes this road is very busy, also with the new traffic from the Chicos as well, there's more cars coming in this area. So that's really about it. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, members of the board.
Thank you, Mr. Fioravanti. Mr. Tedisco?
Yes, there are a couple of other individuals who would like to address the board.
Okay.
Mr. Galenick is, please identify yourself with your name and address and unmute yourself to speak to the board.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board and fellow residents of Eastchester. My name is Charlie Galenick, 21 Potter Place, Eastchester, New York. I have a series of questions to the owner and the owner's personnel that have spoken. We have 3 parking spots. 2 we know are going to be taken by their personnel. 1 supposedly open to drop off for some of the parents. And the town, by law, requires 20. So we have 3, but we really are supposed to have 20. Statement was made that the parents won't be coming west up Brook Street. If they're coming from Tuckahoe, wouldn't folks at that time of day, especially rush hour, maybe desire to take the Bronx River? And if they do, where would they get off? On Brook Street. And which way would they be going? They'd be going east. And then also folks going to the Bronx River to go to work would be going west. So I can't believe that there won't be drop-offs on both sides of the street, or people won't be coming up Brook Street in both directions, depending on the time of the day. I believe you'll see more going west in the morning and more going east in the evening. Current location, 777, is a shopping center. It's the ideal my opinion, ideal location. You have a lot of parking spots. You have one way you can go in and then you turn around. It's all one circle direction. Lots of room in here. And you're not blocking up a street to do and conduct your business. So it is not, so with the traffic person talking about current location being close by, that part is correct. But being similar is not correct, in my opinion. One of the customers spoke about never having a situation. Well, I think he mentioned he dropped off the child at 8:30 to 9 o'clock. Well, what's the traffic really look at 8:30 and 9 o'clock? What's it look like at 7 in the morning? Somewhere in that vicinity, a little different. And how about picking up at 3:30 to possibly 5 o'clock? 5 o'clock, you're going to see a lot of traffic. But 3:30, what do you think? Yeah, kids are going to be out of school, so maybe not so much. So it's not really the person that, if you want to make an evaluation of what the traffic is really going to be like, this is not the ideal person. It's great business, service to the community, poor location. You're going to have people, we all have children, we're all parents, and we know that although in your heart, you know you have to be someplace, but sometimes things happen with kids. You can't get out when you think you're going to get out, you know, and if you can see all the formulas presented to us tonight. But the reality of life is, what are you going to do if it's not? You're going to say, okay, you can't operate your business anymore? I don't think so. This is a bad location for this type of business. And I hope that all you board members realize the difference between this current location the current location on 777 and also here on Brook Street. Which one is the better one, and why would you want to approve something with so many variances on it? Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Galenik. Mr. Didisco, anybody else?
One moment.
Well, Mr. Tedisco, what I'm going to do...
Okay, it looks like,
Go ahead.
are there any other members of the public that wish to address the board on this application?
Mr. Tedisco, I'm not going to close the public hearing at this moment anyway, but I think what I'd like to do is take an opportunity to have our traffic expert, Mr. Greeley, speak on the application. The public hearing will be open, so if anyone else wants to comment, I wanted to get all the comments in before Mr. Greeley spoke. But Mr. Greeley, would you like to present on this, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. Philip Greeley, Colliers Engineering and Design. Just a little background history. Mr. Carlito didn't get into some of it. The applicant had prepared a traffic study last September 2020. We had commented on that in a memo in October 2020, had about a dozen comments. They range from additional information on accidents. From the time that they did their study, the Chicos had opened. So we asked for some updated information on the Chicos traffic relative to Ray Place. Asked for some input from Westchester County because Brook Street is a county road. Talked about our concerns about the potential for people to have to cross Brook Street if they were coming from the west, and asked the applicant to come up with a plan so that that would not occur. They would have a designated plan for drop-off. Some other information relative to traffic at Brook Street and White Plains Road, additional information on parking, and some further clarifications on how they expected this pickup drop-off area to work. So we had outlined all those comments, also, how vehicles would get in and out of the driveway. This driveway, as the chairman pointed out, is directly across from Ray Place. We wanted to see turning tracks of how you could get in and out of the parking spaces. The driveway is only a 16-foot wide driveway, so we wanted to see how vehicles could enter and exit. Again, there's only 3 parking spaces there. And then also some additional information on how their current pickup and drop-offs occur by time of day. The applicant's engineer had done projections of trip generation, et cetera, based on standards. And then it was supported by the data of the current operation. So that was just a little bit of the background of what we asked to be looked at and to be analyzed, to analyze the traffic movements at Ray Place and Brook Street. Because their study was done during the pandemic, they had used reference to previous data that had been collected pre-pandemic, both for the 5 Ray Place project and other projects in the area. So we felt that they had a good background database, with the exception of the fact that they were working with projections for the Chicos, but they subsequently did do new counts to get the turning movements coming in and out of Ray Place with the Chicos operating. What those counts showed that the volumes were slightly higher than the previous projections. The traffic on Brook Street, because we were still in the pandemic, was down lower in peak hours, but they were able to adjust that based on the historical data. So their report that Mr. Carlito summarized tonight, it was presented in a report March 30th, and that responded to each of our 12 comments. They have addressed each of those comments. However, I'd like to give, kind of the summary points. Number 1 and 2 both relate to parking. So relative to their staff parking, they had identified in their report that they need parking for 6 staff members. They have 2 on site. They've made arrangements with the town to have 2 permit parking spaces. So that covers 4. So they still have 2 employees that need to park that don't have a place to park at the current time. They are going to request from the town board to free up some of the other spaces in the lot just to the south of CVS that are underutilized, to request that they be made into permit spaces, and then they would secure those permit spaces. So that's dependent on a town board decision. So, their study shows that they would have at least a shortfall of 2 spaces for their employees. In terms of the drop-off procedures, the plan that Mr. Carlito Holt showed indicates that anybody coming from the west would be directed to turn on to either Summerfield or Dunwoody and then up Summerfield, so that they would be on the correct side of Brook Street to drop off the students and not have to cross Brook Street. That was one of our major concerns, but there is an option, and they've defined how they would instruct parents. But again, that requires those spaces in front of the building to be available. Those spaces are metered spaces. I believe they're 2-hour spaces, if my memory is correct. So their proposal is to modify those spaces, the 2 metered spaces, plus the space in front of their driveway, to, during those 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the afternoon, to be a limited duration space, so that people are not parking there for 2 hours and they're not available. So again, that requires a town board action to make that change. Our concern is that, number 1, if the town board isn't agreeable to that, there is not an adequate space to drop off and pick up the students. Even with a limited duration, that doesn't guarantee that those spaces are always available. In general, in the morning hours, there's more availability of spaces further to the west, so that may not be as much of a concern. But in the afternoon, when the commercial uses and other uses there are busier, if those spaces aren't available, we're concerned with that pickup drop-off. As I said, they did analyze the traffic coming from Ray Place with the Chico's open, and the volumes were slightly higher, but they did analyze that. Their driveway would basically be the 4th leg of that intersection. They analyzed it according to procedures, shows that it would function. But again, the key here is the pickup drop-off. I think the public has raised those questions, and they're dependent on the town board action for that to be put in place. Other than that, we had some other comments in our April 9th summary. As I said, the applicant's engineer addressed each of the items. We would still like some more input from Westchester County. This is a county road. They will need a permit for the driveway, and we had some concerns on site distances, which they addressed, but we want to make sure that the county is on board with it. And that may even require a removal of a parking space on Brook Street. So I think those are our quick comments. They're outlined in our memo. But there is a little bit more history of the studies that the applicant had undertaken. They've worked very hard to be responsive to our original comments, but there are still some concerns because of the fact that those spaces are not earmarked only for this use. And even if it's limited duration in the afternoon, you could have somebody, stop there and go into the pharmacy or one of the other businesses, and we'd be fighting for spaces. So that was our real big concern there.
Thank you, Mr. Greeley. So I think at this time, because a lot of material has come from Mr. Greeley and the public, I'd like, if the applicant would like to reply, and Mr. Holt as well, to this, what seems to be the major focus of the application in the parking.
Sure. So I just one point of clarification. I wasn't saying that the actual vehicular traffic patterns are similar to where the daycare is located today. My point being that the staff members and the enrollment is existing, right? So you know what the enrollment's going to be. You know what staff members need parking. And that's what I was saying was similar. So, I recognize that it's not apples to apples with the vehicular traffic patterns, but I just wanted to clarify that. And, we acknowledge that what we're proposing is going to require town board approval, for allowance of 2 metered parking spaces in the lot. Actually, we were proposing in the lot across from CVS, there's metered parking, and we would propose 2 spaces there to be permit parking from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then it could be back to metered parking at all other times. We think that the town board would look favorably upon this because it could be a revenue generator for the town, where you get 2 spaces now that are generating revenue from the permits when they would have otherwise been underutilized. But we fully acknowledge that requires town board approval. With respect to conversion of the on-street parking spaces in front of the site, and that town board approval, and acknowledging Mr. Greeley's comments that there could still be cars parked there during a pickup or drop-off time. I think it's based upon our observations in the area and understanding that there's COVID going on. We found that during those time periods, that on-street parking is underutilized. And in the instance that maybe there's a vehicle parked in one of the spaces, I think there's really additional on-street parking as you move further west down Brook Street, that with the off chance a parent needed to still be on the correct side of Brook Street for pickup and drop off, they might have to walk an extra 20 or 30 feet on the sidewalk. But I think, it would still be adequately accommodated. With respect to traffic operations, although, there's a high turnover of pickup and drop off with vehicular traffic, it is still a relatively low traffic generator. You're talking about having 3 cars arrive or depart in a 10-minute period. So it's really 1 car every 3 minutes. If you look at that in a typical, say, traffic signalized intersection, you'd be seeing 1 car every 2 to 3 cycles of a traffic signal. So it's not really a capacity or operational issue in our opinion. I think what we've presented, and having worked with the town's traffic consultant, we came up with the most safe and efficient pickup and drop off operation we could within the constraints of the site, and acknowledging that it's also relying upon the town board approval of these conversions of current meter parking.
Thank you.
I would also,
and I just would add, I know one of the other questions that kept coming up is what happens if someone's stuck in traffic, and we acknowledge, ideally, parent A, B, and C are going to arrive in this 10-minute period, and et cetera. But, if you look at that chart, half of the times, there's less than 3 pickup or drop-offs. So there's flexibility there that if someone was arriving were departing a little later or earlier, that they could still fold into the three vehicle parameter.
Thank you, Mr. Holt.
I would also like to address a couple of the questions that were posed.
Please do.
I know Margaret is aware I've come down quite a few times because we've had our own challenges in the shopping center that, we've been there 10 years. If you come into the shopping mall, you will see that they have put a sign one way because not parents, but people in the shopping mall go the wrong direction all the time. They're going, instead of coming around, they're going in and going around, which we can't control that because I don't know who these people are. They're not my parents. One of the public speakers talked about people pulling up in front of the daycare and dropping off stuff. That's part of another problem. We can't control the other businesses. People pull up to go to the physical therapy. People pull up to go get their Chinese food. I mean, there's not much we can control regarding that. Right now, in that parking lot, if you come anytime during the day, you will see it is very busy after 9 o'clock in the morning. Like in the morning early, it's not that much. But as we get closer to 9 o'clock, it gets very busy in there. Our parents don't have a designated place to park. Sometimes they have to park well on the other side where there's a small parking lot, park there, get out, walk through the parking lot and come into the center. So there's challenges within that parking lot because it's so huge. And the landlord has also put cameras because we suspect that people are parking there that are not using some of the businesses. And we try to be really on top of all of that, but it presents a whole nother challenge in trying to control traffic in a parking lot that I don't particularly own or manage. So it's not without its own challenges. It's not as simple. And it would be nice if we had parking spots right in the front. Unfortunately, because of the physical therapy place, those parking spots are designated for people who are handicapped, and so they can get into the physical therapy. So, I mean, they need it more than we do. But I want to also address that, parents walk their kids. They're not kind of letting them run through the street. I think most parents have good judgment that they would not be crossing in the middle of traffic with these are small children. These are not school-age children. These are not children that can walk by themselves. Most of them are babies and they're being carried in car seats and strollers. We also have parents that walk through the community to our facility. So, there's a lot of different variables that present challenges even in the location that we're in now.
Thank you. Would you like to add anything else in your application? Supplement? Okay.
I don't know if Greg has anything to say, but I'm done.
Counselor, do you have anything?
This is maybe one occasion where the attorney isn't going to talk. I was here to answer any questions regarding the balancing test. Obviously, there's a percentage deviation on some of these variances, but I think in some, the impact, and that's what you're tasked with looking at, is there a negative impact upon adjoining properties or upon the character of the neighborhood? And the fact is, this is in a very difficult spot in terms of commercial and yet run down and a lot of challenges with this site. And frankly, I don't know as a matter of law what could be built there or feasibly what would be built there. It would have to be multi-housing, retail. I don't think there's any way to actually get something on that site. And if you did, you're surely talking about traffic issues of a far greater concern. So I'm going to limit it to that and hopefully be available when this application returns to the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Thank you, Counselor. So at this moment, I'm going to go back to the board again, letting the public know that the public hearing remains open. Mr. Cahalan, do you have anything?
Well, I've been quiet tonight on this application. Am I to understand that the public hearing will not be closed tonight?
It will not be closed tonight.
Okay. Then I will reserve my comments till that time.
Okay. Mr. Miller? Mr. Miller?
Sorry, I'm going to follow in Mike's path and reserve my comments till later.
Okay. Mr. Nerzia?
Actually, just two quick comments. I failed to mention that I drive by there every day. My office is just a few blocks from there, and I've never noticed that building there. So it's just kind of hidden behind the ivy and everything else. But the proposed plans are actually very nice. But that being said, I hate to keep on harping on the question of what time the parents drop off. You had two clients who spoke glowingly of your services, but when they were talking, they all mentioned that they showed up between like 8 and 9, not a 10-minute block. So at your current location, do you have that grid where they have to follow or not?
So the current location, we put the times that the parents are arriving based on a couple of months of data when they're coming in, and that was kind of the grid we came up with. And so now looking at because we never really looked at how they were arriving, we just know that there's never a lot of parents, more than 2 or 3 parents outside the door when we're bringing kids, especially since the pandemic started. But when Carlito, I gave him all the data, not just from this center, but I also have centers in Mamaroneck in a residential area. I gave him the data for that too. It facilitates that drop off and pick off schedule. So part of what we're saying is that we will now have to require that to try to ensure that we don't have all of this overlap, if there's potential room for overlap, so that we know ahead of time who's supposed to be here and why, and we can intercept problems if they arise. I'm not saying that there won't be problems, because you never know. Life is life.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further, Mr. Nerzia?
No, that's it.
Mr. DeMarco?
Nothing, thanks.
Okay. So that I'm clear on something. Mr. Greeley, are we waiting for the county to opine on the curb cut? And you mentioned something about an opinion on sight lines.
Yeah, so the applicant has had some conversations with the county. It's our understanding that's what they presented in their report. We would like to, get copies of any written correspondence, and if they could further that input, just to make sure that the county doesn't come back with something that hasn't been addressed. So yes, we would like to see that. If there is any written correspondence, the applicant in their report or their March 30th memorandum indicates that they've discussed it, but we haven't really gotten the details of that. So we would like that, yes. And then again, the two issues relative to the town board, I think, are significant. And the other items that we asked for are really some clarifications and really giving an understanding. So, for example, the number of trips that they're generating are, reasonable. But we'd like to see that, for example, to show that there's no impact at Route 22 and Brook Street, to show that level of volume versus what's being generated by this project, just so that the board has a better understanding. Are we talking about 20 trips out of 1,500 trips that are already there? So, I think it's just some cleanup items, but we would like the county's input. And the critical items are really dependent on the town board, because if we can't get those spaces redesignated in front of the building, there's no guarantee. And, the applicant is going to have to make arrangements for their staff parking, but the spaces on the street are critical.
Thank you, Mr. Greeley. And actually, that was one of my concerns and why the application and public hearing will remain open, because there are certain assumptions that the application is based on that unfortunately cannot be answered. And that is that although maybe some employees now take the bus, what you're doing is providing for each employee to be able to park. And right now that's based on assumptions that the town will issue these and will be doing certain things that, as Mr. Greeley said, we're going to need to know more about at the next meeting. And I would like to hear more about the curb cut and the sight lines and these other things that we've discussed. the other issue, and Mr. Nerzi has raised this, is that to this moment, I'm still not clear on traffic flow, because I'm hearing a number as far as what enrollees or students or whatever we're calling them, children are, but the numbers don't seem to jive with what's being dropped off and picked up. So I think the board needs to understand really how it functions. It seems very mysterious, and I think maybe you can be clearer with that. That would help. Because these are all factors in mitigating what is a very large variance for parking in that, again, that T intersection on a busy street. And again, the other assumptions are just, unfortunately, they're not solvable, and that is what the chaos theory says, what parents are going to do and where they're coming from. You could direct them, but we're going to be considering some factor of non-compliance. It's part of life. It doesn't mean that it's fatal to your application, but full compliance is not realistic. And I'll just say one thing. There's an old maxim in variances and applications, that is, you judge the application and not the applicant. But I have to tell you that the applicant, it should be noted, is a valued member of the community and has a sterling reputation with the building department. So when I say that some of your assumptions are not guaranteed going forward, it's certainly not to critique your reputation, because you've been before this board, and what you've done with the, I guess we'll call it the parking jungle gym type thing, and what you've done with the community, again, no one has a bad word to say about your operation. So every applicant gets the same courtesy, but certainly you're not going to get less. Let's put it that way. So I would say at this point now, I'm going to adjourn the application for further information and further hearing in the May meeting. Is there a second to my application? Mr. Cahalan, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Greeley, I appreciate your input, and I hope you'll be available for the May meeting to give us a synopsis of what's been provided to you.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm sorry, Mrs. Yulee?
Alan, I'll just say I'll coordinate with the applicant with regard to reaching out to the town board. As Mr. Greeley said, the full analysis was submitted to us at the end of March, so it's relatively recently that we had sufficient information to present to the town board. So I think we have sufficient information now to give them the full picture, and I will coordinate with the applicant as soon as possible so they get a better understanding of how amenable the board will be to some of these issues prior to the May meeting.
Okay. Anyone further? Okay. So I make a motion to adjourn the April meeting. Is there a second to my motion?
Second.
Mr. Cahalan, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. See you in May.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time tonight.
My pleasure.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.